All righty. Thanks, Barbara.
Okay, hi everybody, welcome back. We are pleased to present a program that Village to Village Network and Goodwin House Incorporated started about 9 months ago. I guess it's been about that. I welcome Jessica and Rob. I'll let you take it away. Please introduce your panel and go from there.
Thanks. I'm Jessica Fredrickson. I'm the Brain Health Program Manager at Goodwin House. And so I've been working diligently on our Stronger Memory program and working with all of the great contacts at the Village Network to roll Stronger Memory out in, I think we've got 17 villages now. So that's been really, really exciting. I have 3 panelists who have been running Stronger Memory in their villages: Diane Watson, Dorothy Pytel, and Lynn Golabrafrano. And then I also have Rob Liebrick on here as well, the CEO of Goodwin House. Rob, do you want to introduce yourself? I think you might be on mute, Rob.
Huh. He's unmuted, but we're not getting sound from him. Perhaps there could be a microphone plugged in or anything like that. Ooh. Rob, if you want to log back out and come back in again, and then we'll get to know you before the discussion's over. Okay, cool. Okay.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start. We'll let our panelists introduce themselves in a few moments when we get to their sharing of their experience. But first, I just want to give some context to Stronger Memory and an introduction of the program. So this quote, the #1 fear about longevity is losing one's mind, and for good reason. So I've been working in senior living for a while, and it seems like we are making more and more health initiatives, healthcare advancements that let us grow older and live physically healthier longer. But with that is this increase in fear about getting dementia or having some cognitive decline. So our focus at Goodwin House with Stronger Memory is, how do we really address that concern and make sure that as we're aging, we're also living well cognitively. Brain health right now is more important than ever. Growing aging population. So as we all know, the baby boomers are growing, and we have a decreasing workforce at the same time. So we've got this growing population that needs more care, but due to low birth rates and decreased immigration, we don't have as many caregivers available. And additionally, another thing that makes brain health so important right now is the amount of cognitive challenges that we're seeing in individuals post-COVID-19. So it's important to keep in mind, Alzheimer's and other dementias are not a normal part of growing older. There's some change that happens as we grow older, but Alzheimer's and dementia is not a given, not a normal part of growing older. And after the age of 65, the risk of Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. So by age 85, that risk has reached nearly 50%. We can't do anything about our age, but we can do things about some other factors to try and reduce this risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. So like I said, everyone experiences some slight cognitive challenges and changes during aging. This is that bright green line. So this green line represents, maybe it's harder to focus. It's harder to remember new names. You notice a little bit of slowing down. It's frustrating, but it doesn't impact your day-to-day life. So that's what is normal aging, what everyone kind of experiences. Then if you go down to the light blue line, that's preclinical dementia or cognitive change. And so in that preclinical stage, the individual might be noticing that something isn't right, that there's more significant memory challenges, but the doctor, the individuals around them don't know at that point that there's an issue. This darker blue line is mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. And MCI is really the precursor to dementia. Once someone develops mild cognitive impairment, that means that there are some cognitive domains being impaired significantly. You're still able to go about your day-to-day routine, but things that are more complicated, like driving to a doctor's appointment, you might find challenges with remembering where to go, remembering those directions. So what we've seen is there's a growing instance of MCI among older adults, and that tends to lead to dementia, which is that red line. There's different stages of dementia, but dementia is when that cognitive impairment is interfering with your day-to-day abilities, your everyday life. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rob to introduce this lovely woman on the slide.
All right, Jessica, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Awesome. And I think this lovely woman might be with us today, at least on the phone. So I'm Rob Lubrick. I serve as president and CEO of Goodwin House, which is a faith-based not-for-profit serving older adults for the last 55 years out of Northern Virginia. And this is a very personal journey. So the personal part of this is my mom, Wendy. She lives in Oregon, and she is coming up on 55 years of marriage, which is exciting. She's got 3 kids. I'm the youngest of 3. And she's been able to notice a couple of things in her life, but she's very physically active. She's socially active, college graduate, non-smoker, non-drinker. Why are all these things important? These are all risk factors as it relates for dementia. And in 2011, my mom at the time was 68, was finding a couple of things occurring. One, she was repeating her thoughts. She was forgetting her conversations. And probably most scary of all at the time was she was getting lost in familiar places. And that's a real challenge. And of course, my dad at the time was both getting frustrated, but probably much more scared than anything else, because as Jessica referenced, these things were starting to impact her daily activities. Now, if you have mild cognitive impairment, when we did a test, that's what my mom came back with. There's a pathway to dementia. About 38% of folks get to full-blown dementia within a 5-year window of time. So this became really scary as it related to my mom. I think this quote really represents the whole factor that we're trying to come around as it relates to cognitive and brain health. There are no cures for dementia today. However, if we can push off the symptoms of dementia and the challenges that it brings for the next 5, 10, 15 years, we will do ourselves a huge favor. And Barbara referenced earlier in the last session, the gigantic challenge we have with caregivers and not having enough formal caregivers available. So we see this as an absolute imperative for our country to find more and more ways to prevent the need for care, which is exactly what my mom has been able to find for the last 9+ years. So this is the journey we've been on. In 2011, we took the tests, and my mom took tests and showed brain function challenges. And I had no answers, even though I was 9 years into service to older adults at the time. In 2012, I went to a leading age conference. And when I did that, I found information out of Japan that for the last 15 years, they had found great success in using very simple tools to stabilize brain function scores. And this was with people in nursing home level of care. And I thought to myself, gosh, if this can work with nursing home level folks, maybe I can bring this upstream and help my mom earlier in the process. She didn't need nursing home at the time. So I came back and asked my mom, would you be open to doing a few things, reading out loud, handwriting, and doing some quick math problems on a daily basis, 20 to 30 minutes a day. And I think, Mom, if you do this, you might see some improvement. No guarantees. She started because she was really scared of the alternative. You know, if your brain functions, you're starting to repeat yourself, you're getting lost. She had a real fear, and she had a huge desire to want to be around, to be able to interact with her children and her grandchildren in particular for the years to come. So she had high motivation, which I hope and I believe many of the folks listening today have also high motivation. Well, within a month, her repetition went away, her forgetfulness went away, and her inability to find her places, although sometimes directionally challenged just anyway, at least in familiar places, that also stopped and ceased, which was amazing. And it was really my dad who noticed probably first that the changes were occurring. And certainly my mom was the beneficiary of those changes. So moving on our merry way for 3 years, my mom's doing great. And in 2015, I had a colleague ask me, Judy Wadsworth out of Seattle, when I was in Seattle. She said, Rob, this is great. You just met my mom, just met my dad, thought they were wonderful people. What are you going to be able to do for other people? And we said, okay, that's a good challenge. Let's go at it. And we spent a year when I was part of Aegis Living, which is a provider out of Seattle of assisted living and memory care, creating a program. I worked with an occupational therapist, Helen Halpern, and she also happened to be a teacher. And we worked for a year to think through the right curriculum, the right font, the right layout of information for older adults. And that became the foundation for a program for Aegis, and then ultimately became the foundation for the curriculum that we've redesigned, redeveloped, which is Stronger Memory, which was developed in 2019. And the purpose of Stronger Memory was to roll it out to the world, to allow it to be a free source for everyone and anyone, so that anyone who is faced with these challenges could have some type of hope in their life. And so in January 2020, we took a group of Goodwin House residents and we started to do pilot programs. We did a pre-test for where they were cognitive function-wise. And then 4 months later, we did a post-test. And we found that folks that were involved with this program on a consistent basis saw improvement or stabilization of their scores, which was really exciting. We, in April of 2020, as we all know, we were all impacted by the pandemic. And so we ceased in-person programming on this effort. At the same time, we had a great operation and program called Goodwin House at Home, which is a continuing care support network for folks, but they don't have to move into a community setting. Probably more in line with we work with a lot of villages to provide peace of mind to them in our market areas. And so today we have about 200 members of that group. And we had roughly about 25 members, initially 60 people who showed interest and about 20 to 25 people who took us up on the offer to test out the program in a virtual capacity. And we ran weekly programs where people could come together and check in and make sure that they were utilizing the material correctly, make sure that they were doing the work, 20 to 30 minutes a day. So there is a commitment. And with that group, and that in combination with our original groups, George Mason University, which is part of the University of Virginia network in the state of Virginia, picked up on the work that we were doing, and they became very excited about the non-pharmacological, so non-drug related approach for brain health. And they subsequently wrote an initial report and are going to be presenting on that report at the Gerontological Society of America next month in November. They also have gathered 100 additional participants to do additional research on Stronger Memory in particular. So a lot of excitement for that. And then we were connected with Barbara, and she was really wise and kind to allow us to set up a relationship, a memorandum of understanding between ourselves and Village to Village Network. And we said at the time that we really only had capacity to take on about 5% of the Village Network chapters, which we understood at the time was 350 chapters. We said, okay, the first, let's call it 16, 17, 18 chapters, we'll welcome in. And if they're open to doing some trailblazing together, we'll make sure that this works for their members. And if it works for their members, we'll come back in several months and offer up opportunity for more chapters to get involved. So we're super excited to be able to hear from our panelists and continue the efforts that we've started.
Absolutely. So welcome to Stronger Memory. I like to kind of talk about, before we get into the panelists, we'll talk about what is Stronger Memory. So we've talked about these 3 brain exercises that Wendy was doing. And that's really what what our program is based on. So it's for 20 to 30 minutes a day, 4 to 7 days a week. You spend time reading aloud, writing by hand, and doing simple math problems quickly. And what we know from looking at scans of the brain is that doing these exercises activates the prefrontal cortex, which is this part of the brain right behind your forehead, and it activates both hemispheres of the brain at one time. So we're really exercising all of our brain at once using the prefrontal cortex, which relates to memory retrieval, and lighting up our brain by getting back to the basics for brain health. So on our Village to Village panel, we have Dorothy Pytel from Chicago Hyde Park Village, Diane Watson from Spring Hill Community Village, and Lynn Galabrafrano from Georgetown Village. We're going to guide our conversation with the panelists with these questions, but certainly, I hope Diane, Dorothy, Lynn, you feel comfortable to share anything that's not captured in a question here about Stronger Memory. So first, we'd love to hear, when you first answer, you can introduce yourself and then share what have you learned from doing the Stronger Memory program with your village.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Pytel from the Chicago Hyde Park Village. We started in June, our initiative. And as far as what we've learned, I think that it's really great to have something positive to offer to people. I think oftentimes around cognitive decline, there's very little opportunities to offer something positive. So people really appreciate being able to do something proactively to keep their brains healthy. And I've also found that some of the best ways to promote the program is actually once people start participating, the people that are enjoying and having a good experience and feeling good about it, that's a wonderful way to grow the program.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dorothy.
Hi, I'm Lynn Galabrafrano, Executive Director of Georgetown Village. I'd say I learned a few things. First of all, about the different exercises. I thought it was interesting the way they approach different parts of the brain and help with different areas of memory retention. I also learned that for many of the people in my village, although they're not yet seeing any signs of cognitive decline, they're really worried about this. This seemed to be their biggest fear. And so by offering it, we were proactively addressing something that they weren't struggling with yet, but didn't want to necessarily be struggling with in the future.
Hi, I'm Diane Watson. I'm from the Spring Hill Community Village. And we started our journey with Stronger Memory on August 4th. So we're 9 weeks into the program. What has been emphasized by many of the people participating is you don't think about it, but we have been told time and time again that it's really necessary to spend X amount of time exercising per day to get our physical bodies in shape. And having this program has emphasized the fact that there's some specific exercises that we can do to exercise our brains, which is really important to keep that good cognitive status that everybody is concerned about. And as Lynn had mentioned, and Dorothy as well, The main reason why a lot of people are participating is they want to stave off any potential possibility of having a decline. So they're feeling like doing this is a positive approach.
Thanks. Second question, what are some of the benefits that you've seen due to stronger memory, either you yourself or your participants, or what benefits have you seen within your village by offering this program?
So I would say one of the benefits for my village is we started back in June, and it was a time when people were still pretty well locked up and not going out much. And it really has served a huge community building factor. You know, to the extent that we don't allow new people to join at this point. We are well past our 12 weeks, but the group wanted to continue just because they've gelled so well as a group. So I'm actually starting a second Stronger Memory group this month for those who wanted to get involved, but I felt it would change the dynamics too much to include them at this point. The other benefit is it's really helped to be able to heighten awareness around the whole issue of brain health, because I keep tying it into the Stronger Memory program. So not only has it allowed me a larger opportunity to educate the members, but also to, while educating them, be able to offer them something positive to participate in.
Hi, my group has indicated that the greatest benefit that they feel is the socialization aspect of things, coming together weekly and talking about their experience of doing the homework or not doing the homework, the particular self-motivations that each of them have put on. Some of them have put the books right on the breakfast table, so it's right obvious right in the very beginning. Somebody else says, I don't eat my dinner until I've done my homework. You know, they've done their own particular challenges to make sure that they get done at least the 5 of the 7 days. The one who doesn't eat dinner obviously has done it every single day. So she gets a super gold star. One of the things that many people have mentioned is the fact that out of all the activities, the reading, the writing, and the arithmetic, the reading out loud seems to have hit them and made them aware that there are so many parts of the body interacting. When they are speaking out loud, they're hearing themselves, they're working their mouth and getting the articulation of the words going, whereas if you're seeing the word, you're saying, you're in your mind, you're saying it, but not getting it specifically. And just getting it, reading it out loud seems to make them focus more on what it is that they're hearing, and they're remembering more because of that. They've said that they are more attuned to what they're reading when they do read it out loud.
And I would add that one thing that's been really wonderful, and I think it's overall the pandemic, the silver lining is because we've had to do so much on Zoom, for instance, it's actually allowed us to include people that normally would be excluded. So 2 of the participants from our group have major mobility issues and, you know, can barely move around in their own homes. And so it's wonderful because they can be participating in this program. And if it were in person, it would actually hinder them from participating. So that's been sort of a surprising silver lining to this pandemic. The other benefit I would say is I feel like you know, we're here all to grow this village movement. And I must say, we've had some excitement around new memberships as a result of this. So I think that just expands the, sort of say, your toolbox of things to offer to people to get them engaged in your village.
Absolutely, that's great. Third question is kind of 2 questions in one. But what advice or what encouragement do you have? What advice, what lessons learned do you have for others?
Jessica, you buffered. So I don't know.
Oh,
It might be
okay.
helpful. It might be helpful if you turn your video off. I hate to do that, but it might help you with your audio.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah. So whatever you just said, can you repeat?
Yeah. Yes, I apologize. The third question is kind of two questions in one. So what encouragement do you have for other villages wanting to start this program? And then any advice or lessons learned for those other villages who might want to start Stronger Memory?
I would say that, definitely present it to the community and ask for anybody who wants to spontaneously participate. And no matter how many people come forward, I would say go with it, because it's definitely word of mouth that seems to reach out to the others, and one person hearing it from another person who's actually participating gets the interest going. I think the hardest thing for most people was to say that they were going to commit for the 12 or 16 weeks that was originally projected. When they did make that commitment and actually got to meeting as a group, we're doing it in person at this point in time. Hearing people verbalize the same kinds of issues in doing their homework and why they're not doing it, and the suggestions that they're making for each other or to themselves is giving insight to the others for participating. And as I said specifically, once the word got out about who was participating and the value that they put on it, I think for a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier about the reading out loud, it made them aware of the different parts of the body working together. One of the things that seems to be the hardest, and it makes you realize the adage about if you don't use it, you lose it, makes us realize that in this world of technology that we are using the computer, we don't do handwriting the same way as we did when we were younger. So forcing ourselves to do the handwriting and the journaling, answering the questions, has made people feel that they're stronger in their hand, but actually also the questions that are asked, it's a little thought-provoking. And as people are taking the time to figure out how they're going to write for the 10 minutes, and then they realize that it uncovers some memories of particular things. And when they go back and speak to their family members or others that were impacted by that particular incident, they're actually spreading the word and making the other people feel well as well. So no matter how many people sign on, go for it.
I guess one piece of advice would be not to promote a business here, but just do it would be what I would say, because it's actually a very low bar to actually setting this program up in your village. So for instance, everyone was always asking us, well, what's the cost of participating? And our village chose to just print up the manuals, which include the math sheets as well as some writing prompts and the books, of course, or the literature you choose yourself. So it really, it was a small cost, but we felt like the benefit of it was outweighs, and we, encourage people, if they were thankful, that they're welcome to make a donation to our village if they want, and many did, so that's great. So we actually essentially recouped the cost. The other piece of advice, and we've already mentioned it a couple times, but I often use the brushing your teeth kind of thing. Like, think of it like brushing your teeth. It's just something you've internalized because it's good, and it's really something that just kind of helps to maintain your oral health so that you can then, speak as well as eat. And so these kind of exercises are the equivalent, but for your brain, so that you can function that way. And then we have monthly check-ins right now with other villages that are doing the program. And one of the villages mentioned that some of their members have used it as an opportunity to journal and write about experiences in the past, sometimes write letters to family members, but sharing those stories with family members, it has opened up quite new avenues for sharing historical experiences with loved ones, who then get to enjoy that experience with you.
I think one advice I would give is to be flexible. I know some of the reading prompts spoke to some of our members and some didn't. The other piece of advice I would give is I think it helps to broaden the program by adding extra resources and giving members other areas that clearly they're interested in brain health. This is an opportunity for them to be able to take it further and to learn more about it. I also emphasize, as physical exercise, you do physical exercise, you need to do exercise for your mind as well. And in terms of the encouragement, I would say that just roll it out. And, I'm sure people will be interested. There's been many positive comments from members of my group about how this helps them stay focused. And, they see a difference when they do take a few days off. And also, you might want to prepare some extra materials because we're still going. And so we are looking for additional materials. I did share this with Jessica that, and I know you're expanding the program for longer periods, but I also personally have started, coming up with a list of writing prompts to be able to share with the members and other areas where they can expand on what they're doing because they are so into it. I hate to say, oh no, we're done now. So therefore, it's helpful to be able to keep it going.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other comments from our panelists that weren't covered by these questions?
I think one thing that we came up against because we started in the summer, we proposed it as a 12-week program and then the 12 weeks were over. So we kind of had to figure out, well, what are we going to do? And it sounds like we decided to do something different than what Lynn's group did. We talked with the members and we decided that we could accommodate 15 to 20 people because we are using Zoom. That's sort of the amount of people you had suggested, Jessica, as a good number. And we were well below that number. And so we took 1 week where we had an introductory session for the new folks so that they could ask sort of more simple questions. And we told the folks that were in the summer program, take a break off, that day, or come if you want to sort of be our expert to answer questions. And then we resumed, and Monday was our second session. So I think we're just going to run these as 12-week sessions and then give people the opportunity to then opt out if they want. And some people will say, I like this program, but I don't need the check-in. I just, it's important enough for me. I'll do it by myself. And we've had some people who said, I've got other things that are, taking more importance. One person had a major health issue come up. So obviously that then becomes a priority to deal with that first.
Some of the people in our group that sort of hopped off, it has been because of those issues, either medical issues for themselves or other family issues. They seem to look at those gatherings as a little bit of an accountability, knowing that the others are going to be asking if they're doing it or not doing it, is a way of keeping things going. Some of them have voiced concern that if they don't do it, they might get hung up in all the day hustle and bustle that we all do. Many times people say, I don't know how I found time to work since I'm retired. But the long and short of it is, like with the physical exercise, you sort of have to make the time, and knowing that you're going to be talking to somebody else about it sort of enforces that.
And for my group, what happened was the writing prompts really, helped them to share personal stories. And so they just really, they really got to know each other and really liked each other. We have, at this point, one man participating. Actually, he was the only male who signed up and the rest are all women yet. They've just formed this nice cohesive group that they have, individually came to me and said, can't we keep going? And I thought, sure, why not? You like being with each other. And they're not necessarily, I think 2 of them were friends before the group. The others don't necessarily live that close to each other and really didn't know each other other than maybe seeing each other at a village tour or something. So this really helped in terms of forming a larger community within the village itself, whereas they were all members, but they got to know each other better for people who didn't really know each other that well.
And at the check-ins, when we talk about, okay, what did you find about, or what did you think about as you were doing your activities during your week? What was good for you? What was not good for you? Some of the people voiced the idea, well, you know, this math is a little bit beneath me. It's too simple. You know, some of the people that have a background in doing numbers, be it as public accountants or financial officers, you know, they do deal with numbers, and some of those things they were going by very quickly. And some of the other people were saying, well, you know, I don't seem to get as many pages done as you. And you know, other people were saying, well, you know, it's just the fact that we're doing it. We're just getting our brain organized. It doesn't really matter, you know, how many pages people do. It's what you feel like you're doing for yourself that matters. So I think reinforcing to people that wherever you are, just the fact that you're doing something proactively is a good thing.
And the front of the manual has wonderful visuals of a brain that's engaged while reading aloud, and a brain engaged in math, and that specific issue of the math problems and the difficulty of them. In fact, when you're doing advanced math problems, you're actually using just a very select small part of your brain, whereas if you're doing simple problems, you're using a very large part of your brain. So I always try to put it that way. And one of our members even said, well, they might be simple, but in between they throw one that's a different pattern than what you're seeing. And so it's not really about how easy, it's just about you paying attention and noticing that one that's not the same pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. Those math pages are great for focus, that's for sure.
And I think there was a question about clarifying regarding what kind of reading material. So, and everyone who participates can choose what they want. So they can read the newspaper, they could, you know, choose their favorite book or some poetry. So and ideally you choose what really you enjoy so that you're motivated to read it. So we have actually 2 couples that are in the program, and they enjoy reading to each other. So it's also nice to have an audience, and even a cat or a dog can be your audience, and then you can enjoy the reading out loud a little bit more.
Yeah, that's great. Excellent. Well, we'll get to the questions in a moment. Here's an example of some of the math. So as we said, it is pretty easy. It starts off easy, and that's for a reason. You want to think about the math like piano scales or doing basketball drills. It's not about learning new information. It's really about exercising that routine, that historical knowledge, using that prefrontal cortex. This is an example of some of our writing prompts. So they are introspective. Most of them are really positive and aimed to help you share your story, whether you write it for yourself or share it in the group. A lot of participants have even started using these prompts to write down stories that they share with their spouse or their children. If you don't like the writing prompts, the key is that you're writing by hand in cursive if you can. So I have some participants who don't like to answer the questions, but they journal every day, and that counts. That's just as good. I also have some participants that really don't like writing about themselves, so they write about the book they're reading or something in the newspaper. So the key is just that you're writing by hand and not typing on a computer, not having to look things up. It's not trivia. You're just writing kind of free-flowing by hand. This is that great picture that's in the front of the workbook that I think Dorothy was mentioning earlier. And you see your brain in idle thought, that red and orange color, that's the part of your brain that's working. So if you're watching something, something not that stimulating on TV, looking out the window, your brain isn't really actively engaged. Now, sometimes we need that, but we also want to exercise our brain. So when your brain is reading a book out loud, you can see both hemispheres are lit up, they're red and orange and yellow. and that prefrontal cortex is working, and really all different areas of your brain are working together. So we're exercising those connections, those neural pathways. Now the bottom row shows your brain solving a difficult math problem. It might feel like our brains are working really hard when solving a difficult math problem, but really only very small parts of the brain are engaged. When we perform simple math quickly, both hemispheres are working very hard, working together, and that prefrontal cortex is activated. And that is what's really key in seeing these benefits in memory and focus and in recall. So, opportunities for you all and your villages to get involved. We would like to have the first 20 groups to sign up after this week. This presentation, they will be in the next cohort to launch Stronger Memory. So we'll give you some really extensive support to get started. The curriculum is offered for free. You can download it and print it yourself or take it to a local printer. I think that's what most of the villages found was most cost effective. We do sell the workbooks in a spiral bound printed version. We just charge printing and shipping cost. So this program is free. We have no restrictions on how many copies you can make or anything like that. If you want to launch Stronger Memory and sign up now, you can do, you'll get consultation and facilitator training with myself and Perry Weinfeld, our new Stronger Memory coordinator. And we'll meet with you one-on-one and as a group with other facilitators to make sure you have all the tools you need to feel confident rolling this out in your village. There's definitely some advice and lessons learned, but depending on the size of your village, it can be really personalized to what's going to work best for you. And then we've got those monthly facilitators meetings. So I'm on those, Perry will be on those, and other Village Network facilitators will be on to discuss any challenges that are coming up, any updates, and any best practices, any things that are working really well. At times we'll have guests like Rob come and talk, or we had our George Mason research team come and answer some questions that the facilitators had as well. So our goal is to be a support, to provide as much support as needed to make your village successful with Stronger Memory. We are still doing research with George Mason. So for individuals who are interested in participating in that, we can connect you with that research as well. They're doing their assessments and everything on Zoom.
Great.
Well, thanks for thanks for joining. Here's my contact information. I know we're just about at time, but are there any urgent questions that I missed that people had?
I think Rob has been behind the scenes doing a lot of the questions, especially the ones in Q&A, so I didn't have to do them. So thank you. I don't
Good. Thanks,
know that
Rob.
we missed any. Definitely get a hold of us through V2V. We'll be happy to send out your contact information if you want to continue with this program. Lynn, I'm so happy that you're starting a second group. I think that's awesome. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this adventure. So excellent. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
your time.
much.
Anytime. Bye now.
Bye.
Right, so I think we got all of our other.
No, we're
new-
missing Nikki, I think.
Bye.
She should be here in a minute. I will make sure.
Oh, there you are, Barbara.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Let's
Hold on.
see.
Okay, good.
I'll be the one that starts with my screen share, so Is it okay that I start that?
As long
Yeah,
as your
that's good.
dishwasher's not going, okay?
I wish it was that. It was my washing machine. I work out of my basement, and that was just. You had
That's
to
good.
call on me
That's
right then. I
good.
was like, no, no.
Okay, Nikki, I've just promoted you.
I
to
love it.
panelist.
Oh, good.
Nikki's in there. Nikki's in
I
there.
got her.
Okay,
She
good.
should be in there.
All
Okay.
right, well, I am gonna kick this off and welcome our panel, our last session of the day, which is the community organizing to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's going to be kicked off by Emily Miller, our illustrious board member. And you can actually introduce your team. So thanks, Em.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. I'm joined with just an impressive panel. So I'll actually let them introduce themselves. So we're going to go in sequential order. You hear from all of us a little bit, but I'm going to kick us off. I want to start first. You should see my screen. My name is Emily Miller. I'm on the Village Network Board of Directors. I'm a social worker. I work in aging and disability services. But enough about me. I want to give you a primer into community organizing, essentially 101. So so there's so many different directions you can take this. So I want to give you some core takeaways. And specifically on each slide, I put a source. I really encourage you to look up that source, to cite that source. They're very, very strong resources for you. So let's just start with, what is community organizing? Community organizing is the process by which people come together to identify common problems or goals. They're mobilizing resources and in other ways develop and implement strategies for reaching the objectives they want to accomplish. This might sound familiar to you. The fundamental purpose of community organizing is to help discover and enable people's shared goals. And that's informed by values, knowledge, and experience. Okay. Now, again, we're going on an accelerated step here. What are the basic steps of community organizing? What does this entail? It starts with listening. And I cannot stress that enough. Every single step might be called listening, but it's the core of what you do. It's this listening process. Systemically listening to dozens of people in the community in order to select problems and visions and scout for people for this new organization, such as a new village, right? Then you might move to that first meeting. We're bringing people together where they prioritize what's most important to them. And that's compiled through all that listening you've done. So you're establishing a membership-based organization which solves those issues. So people are there because it's important to them for some reason. They identify with membership in some way. Then there's some type of regular meetings. You're bringing people together regularly, it's expected, to prepare research or strategize for these actions together. And then research. What are the steps you want to take? What are the solutions? In our heads here, our shared experiences, well, a village can help with that, or this service, or this group, or this person, right? So you identify potential solutions and decision makers and the institutions which have power to help make those solutions possible. Then moving to action. You're taking action with the group to solve problems. You're engaging with those decision makers and those institutions through negotiation, using confrontation maybe, or pressure when necessary. And then building, right? So let's grow our organization. Building large, sustainable, democratic groups capable of addressing numerous demands, needs, and wishes in the community. This comes from minorityRightsCourse.org. Again, there's many different approaches to community organizing. I'm trying to give the most helicopter view for you. So continuing forward, community organizing typically includes getting an understanding of the community, right? That listening again. So this key is learning, what is the community like? What's important to the residents, right? When we think of villages, we think of grassroots. And that is so important because this is the foundation of the work you do. Based on that, you're generating and using power, okay? There are so many different types of power. We can have a whole session on that. Now, depending on the nature of your organization, the structure of your village, your approach, your long-term goals, your organization may have or need different types. So different kinds of power, so political or legislative power. We heard earlier the legislative update. So using that to inform your approach. Consumer power. Hey, we can organize a boycott. We can say, look at the buying power of our membership. Look at the organization or the geographic area here and the amount of people that have influence over the consumption. Legal regulatory power. You might battle one particular issue and take that to court. Maybe not the most appropriate in our setting, but it's important to be aware of. And then there's disruptive power. So going on strike, voicing an opinion about something in your community. So you got an understanding your community, we're understanding and generating power, and then articulating the issue, right? Think about it. Everyone knows that statistic or that fact of smoking, being lonely is just as unhealthy as smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. We all know that because it's been articulated. So how can we articulate through effective organizing what is most important and what should be done about it? Why are villages important and why should they exist? Let's plan about that. Action planning is central. Effective community organizing, we're going to have purposeful actions, purposeful programming, and engagement with the community and around. You do that through involving other people. So it works mostly because of the strength that exists in numbers, in your membership, in your interested parties. The idea that what we can't do alone, we can often accomplish together, right? This is what community organizing is really all about. Going further, you're generating and using other resources. So while involving many people is at the heart of any community organizing effort, the group needs to obtain other resources. So you're strategic in how you approach that. So cash, gifts, expertise, advisory boards, people to steward and guide the direction and support the direction you're moving in. And then communicating with your community, right? So going back to the beginning of listening, who is your community? There are many ways to get the word out and let the community at large know what you are doing, why you are doing it, and why they should be a part of it. Okay, so the community toolbox cited below is an excellent resource to dive much more deeper into this. Now, what I want to close my portion on is a self-reflection. If you know me, usually I answer your questions with a question, and I'm going to do that again today. Community organizing is all about listening and self-reflection and lifting up others along the way. So we think about our grassroots approach with villages. So I want you to ask yourself a tiny sampling of these questions. What are your motivations when you began doing this work, villages? Think about that. Is the primary goal of the work you do to help people get ahead or to help them get better or get together? Pardon me. So work you do to help people get ahead or help them get together? In what ways have your ties with governmental or community agencies separated you from the people you serve? How do you nurture and develop leadership skills in the people you serve? So lifting others up. How do you ensure that the people you serve represent themselves in the organization and other levels of decision-making that affect their lives? And are you involved in community-based social justice struggles? I can't stress enough this, if there's one takeaway from my portion, the revolution will not be funded beyond the nonprofit industrial complex is an incredible resource. Happy to point you in that direction. And it outlines many more. So feel free to take a screenshot of this. Everything's being recorded. So I'll leave you with these questions. What I'd like to do next is pass it over to Tracy and Nikki. Should be able to share your screens. If not, I can do that for you. Thank you for staying with me as we move fast.
Thank you, Emily. I am struggling with my screen sharing, but I'm going to try it here.
Okay.
And are you seeing somewhat of a PowerPoint?
Not just yet. And Nikki, you're muted, by the way.
Not yet, Tracy.
It's coming through now, I believe.
Okay. So just a moment. Apologies for this little from the beginning. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
We can see the presenter portions. You're going to want to swap those displays.
Okay, apologies for this. Emily, if you know how to do, if you want to just, if there's a way that you would share, just because you seem to be more dexterous in this, and
Let's do that.
Struggling.
It's a team effort. Okay, let me do this.
Yeah, and I wish I could help. I don't have that slide deck.
All right, you should see that coming through.
That's great.
Okay.
Okay. Just a moment. Okay, apologies. So, hello, I'm Tracy Adair, and I'm here with my colleague, Nikki Nguyen, and we're here to represent the government aspects of and possibilities for government-led funding efforts to engage communities and to diversify structures. I cannot actually see the PowerPoint I'm seeing, so I think, all right. So we work under the King County Government Department of Community and Human Services, and our positions and the work we do is funded through a levy, which is a tax levy coming from property taxes in the King County, Washington area, and the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services levy. The Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services levy leads with race and focuses on equity and social justice. And so these concepts are at the heart of the levy, and the levy intentionally provides support for groups with the least access to services and supports. So the community organizing work for this levy occurred as King County sought to add senior specific funding to what was already the Veterans and Human Services levy. And now it's the levy that I named the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services levy. Through community engagement, levy staff learned of the village concept. And without levy funding, there are already existing in the King County area several villages that have existed for a few or several years, and many of them might be on this call. But when the levy renewal staff, when folks were looking around and asking the questions of the community of what do seniors need, what are the areas in King County where senior funding could be used and where other funding sources, other local or federal funding doesn't exist. And one piece of that was around social engagement and how to connect isolated or lonely seniors to the communities around them. And through that process, the village model was shared and embraced by levy staff. When I came on board as the lead for the team that has the honor of steering these senior focused funding, the senior village concept was one of 75 that was in the levy. Because of the foundational principles in the levy, we made some explicit choices to diversify the village concept in King County. So we looked at the village to village network, saw the wonderful possibilities in that process, and then specifically chose to expand the model by putting into our procurement process some models that would maybe stretch the models that we saw. And as a result of that, we are funding 8 villages, 2 which clearly embrace the models that we understood as the village model, and 6 which are community-centered, culturally identified groups that are working with their seniors to provide services and supports in new ways, and who did not have access to other government funding sources. Maybe these were groups that really embraced the village model, but weren't the concept of a village as intergenerational groups supporting each other, relying on their cultural connections and providing those supports. So slide 3. So because we saw that opportunity for strengthening infrastructures and diversifying funding networks, we are working with the village concept of reciprocity and giving back and making connections. We're also working with these diverse groups where those concepts may be forefront and maybe not forefront. So we're asking ourselves these questions as how we use government funding. What role can government funds play in supporting a village's sustainability? Can a cultural community use concepts of the village movement to support elders across a wide geographic area? How best can we leverage the village model to support villages to meet the needs of their sometimes very vulnerable elders? What does membership look like when membership fees are not what creates the resource and the shared connections? And can we expect models of reciprocity, interdependence, member agency, while honoring the diversity of our funded villages, and while supporting those villages to maintain their missions of sustaining their cultural identities and promoting cultural ties? So as we use our privileged places as funders, how do we support our providers? And how do we embrace, can we at the same time embrace the village to village network model, support these culturally identified groups to build their infrastructures and still honor the elders in their community? How do we do that together? One way we did that was to build the structure of a community of practice. So I'm going to have you next slide. So we bring our villages together one time a month on a monthly basis. Almost all 8 meet, and we work together on supporting this infrastructure and strengthening the voices of the villages. We are currently supporting villages that represent people from Eritrea and Ethiopia, Filipino immigrants, longstanding members in the community of in the Filipino community, Iraqi immigrants, Cambodian immigrants who are coming together for the first time through the Khmer community of Seattle. The Northwest Neighbors Network is one of our villages that is following the village to village model, and we're funding that incipient group to strengthen their current model, but also embrace the diversity of the neighborhoods they are sitting in and to expand their inclusion. We're working with elders from Somalia and Ukrainian Community Center, working with Russian and Ukrainian elders. And then also on this call, I believe, or at least participating in this conference, is our representation from Vashon Senior Center, which we are funding to provide, to build a village from scratch, a couple of villages that represent rural models. But as we sit with that community of practice, there's a lot we are learning together with our villages about how to sustain infrastructures and build. And I am here, I will send it over to Nikki to share what we've learned through that.
Thank you, Tracy. Hi again, my name is Nikki. I work for King County Veterans, Seniors and Human Services Levy. And Tracy did all the hard work with the villages, and she handed them over to me for ongoing support with them. And when I take over, coming from a very diverse Vietnamese immigrant culture, which strongly identifies with the 6 diverse villages that we serve, I come into this strategy learning that this village concept is very different to me and the people from my culture. So in my immigrant culture, it is more about receiving, and the concept of giving back reciprocity is new. We often are not given the opportunity to be leaders or share our expertise. But we are the groups that have been identified as facing with the most barriers and having the highest needs. And so I'm very glad that King County has some funding to support the providers to support those needs. So like Tracy mentioned, I have had the honor of working closely with these 8 funded providers. And one of the things we have been doing is participating in and sharing at our monthly community of practice meetings. And at these meetings, the villages have a chance to share a bit about the culture, let us learn about the culture and who they serve, and they take turn presenting about the village model, which often lead to robust discussion. So we can learn from each other, as well as for King County staff to learn how to best support the needs of these elders using the village concept. At those meetings, one of the things we learned was that the funded organizations are really incorporating and expanding opportunities for elders to participate, be a leader, and giving the expertise, especially with the diverse villages. And while the village provide opportunities for their elders, they learned that many elders who were professionals in their countries, such as doctors, lawyers, and engineers, when they come over here, their skills are not transferable and they are not able to practice. So these villages allow these elders the opportunities to use the skills and knowledge to share with the other elders in the group. We also learned that there are many elders with talents, or they retire with specific skills, who are really involved with this village by offering a class to other elders. And they can, some of those include pottery, ESL, arts and crafts, computer, and technology. And we have learned that these opportunities really allow the elders to feel value, empower, and socially engaged, which is the goal of this strategy. And another thing that we learned from these diverse villages, and they are playing a really important role, is that trust is a really big issue with these diverse communities due to the historical trauma that they went through our experience. And by having the providers and volunteers from the culture and background really increase their trust and willingness to participate in activities. And one of the really important issues that is going on right now is COVID vaccinations, and having people from the background increase that trust and allow a lot of them to participate in that process. And it also helped to increase their acceptance with the Western medicines and treatment services. One of the huge accomplishments during COVID is that many of those villages have served as pop-up vaccination sites, and they were able to provide vaccination to the majority of the elders in the communities. And I don't think it would happen if they weren't there. They serve as interpreter, they provide transportation, and they really help to facilitate that process to make it easier. The villages are also using our fund to strengthen the intergenerational aspect and interactions of their program, where elders and youth have opportunities to learn from the expertise of one another. And that aspect is very important in many of the culture. And so they are able to incorporate that into the programming. And overall, from working with them, I learned that these villages are really doing the important work, and they are providing culturally and linguistically relevant supports by removing barriers and really being the bridge to connect the diverse elders with community resources and services, which otherwise might not have happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. To Charlotte.
All right, Charlotte, you are on mute. There we go.
Hi, so great to see you all today. I do know there's some California leaders in the house, and I'm seeing that there are 190 participants, which is fantastic. So congratulations, Village to Village Network and the Planning Committee for doing such a great job. So I want to talk to you about the work that we're doing in California to promote a more diverse movement in California. And so what I'm trying to do is exactly what, let's see from the beginning. Okay, so I want to share with you our path, Village Movement California's path to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So just briefly, Village Movement California is a coalition of villages in our state. There are 45 in California. That's how we count it. And most of those 43 are members of our statewide organization. And we were founded to accelerate the growth of the village movement in California, to deepen its impact, and to ensure its sustainability. And we have a very particular policy context in California, and it's very helpful to have this statewide organization. We also have a number of funders here as well. So one of the very important pieces of our context is that we have a master plan for aging. Our governor, Governor Newsom, called for the development of a master plan for aging when he took office in early 2019. And so we worked within the process of developing the master plan to make sure that villages were included in the plan. We knew that being included in the plan would be a foothold for us to scale our movement, deepen our impact, and ensure our sustainability. So here is the objective, the goal that we're part of, and it's to promote and adapt village models for older adult volunteerism and services, building on the strengths of California's diverse communities. So this, the way that this is articulated, and we're in the goal that relates to social isolation, loneliness, and equity. And they're very interested in, as you can see, our volunteerism that we offer through the village model. So we were both recognized by the master plan, and we were also given a mandate, which is that we need to build on the strengths of California's diverse communities. And we haven't done a very good job of that. We're mostly a white, middle, professional class movement. To be relevant in California, we need to reflect more diversity within our villages. So how are we going about doing that? Well, one of the things that we constantly do, and Village to Village Network does this as well, is to draw on the experiences of our villages and to learn from them. So specifically with this slide, Ashby Village has embarked on a journey that they call a way forward, where they are doing deep work to look at their culture, their assumptions, their membership, and to think about and then learn how to reach out to the diverse communities of the East Bay, which include Latino, African American, and Asian communities. San Francisco Village embarked on a 2-year process with an outside facilitator, and they have incorporated very robust goals around diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, racial justice in their new strategic plan. And they have an ongoing conversation about race within their village. They're also looking at partners. Pasadena Village for a long time has had 2 different groups that are looking at the 1619 project, and then also an inclusion committee. And then Westside Pacific Villages, which is in Los Angeles, is out of COVID, is working at expanding their village presence into some of the lower income, more racially and ethnically diverse communities that surround it within their service area. So we're always learning, and we're always growing, and we're always highlighting our villages. So I think what I want you to take away 3 things. The first thing is that we have to do our own work, meaning that organizations that are predominantly white and that have unconsciously adopted white culture, we have to do our own work. We have to look at white identity, white culture. We have to look at structural racism and our part in it. We have to claim that we're part of this fabric of diversity within our neighborhoods, our communities, our states, and our nation. And if we don't do our own work and really look at ourselves and our culture and how white culture is dominant in our society, if we don't do that work, then our efforts to reach out to communities of color, to immigrant communities, are going to fail. And so in June of 2021, during our annual conference, we invested in a workshop called Building Communities of Belonging. And that workshop, I think there were about 100, 120 people in it. We had some teaching from some outside facilitators who are very adept at working with white groups and also groups of color, do some teaching about the work that we all need to be doing, how we're good people. We make mistakes, and we need to have humility and a sense of humor. But we heard some teaching. Then we watched a video called Waking Up White by an author who did a great job in her video. It's a TED Talk about, just a primer on what it is to be a white person in our country. And then we got into race-based breakout rooms. We had white villagers and white sponsors in some breakout rooms, and we had people of color villagers and people of color sponsors in other breakout groups. We had village leaders facilitating these breakout groups. Some people were comfortable with this, some people were uncomfortable with it, but we really talked about, racial identity and what we're learning. And I felt like it was a start. I felt that this workshop was a watershed moment where we, as a predominantly white movement in California, claimed that and said, we're going to do our work and we're going to move forward with learning, with humility. And then our second point is that we're going to work authentically with partners. So I want to highlight 2 of our partners. One is Sisters Aging with Grace and Elegance. They are a project of the California Black Women's Health Project, and the Sage Sisters have been meeting for about 5 years, and it's a group of Black women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond that come together to support each other, to celebrate, and to learn about aging. And in June of 2018, Carlene Davis, who is a co-founder of SAGE, approached me and approached Village Movement California with the question, will we be their partner as they look at the experiences and the perspectives of Black women? And Carlene Davis is a Robert Wood Johnson Culture of Health Fellow. And as a core question of her fellowship project, she was looking at how does the Village Movement potentially support and respond to the experiences and perspectives of Black women. 3 years later, Carlene had her culminating event last week. For any of you who were there, it was a stunning event. I learned so much, and we're going to be walking together with Carlene and the sisters to see how we might partner together to further develop supports for Black women around the state of California. So partnership is really the way to go. And we can only be authentic partners if we're doing our own work. Another partner that we've been working with since last September is the Untraining. The Untraining is an institute in California that they offer national programming and learning cohorts. And I was very happy to receive some funding from Next 50 Initiative to actually support some of our leadership to be engaged in some intensive training sessions. So I've had 3 leaders go through Untraining White Liberal Racism. I've had one leader go through the Untraining for People of Color and another go through the Chinese Untraining. And I've hired some of their facilitators and founders to work with our board of directors because we as a board and as a statewide organization need to do our work to understand this whole endeavor of trying to become a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. Then I think there's some structural opportunities that we're taking advantage of. Communications. We on our website have a page around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there are a lot of resources there for village leaders. You know, one of the things that is so true now is that there's a lot on the internet. And so we can go to the internet and look things up before we go to community groups and ask them to teach us about their communities. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to take advantage of the resources that are available through the web to kind of get up to speed a little bit before we start engaging. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion team. We're looking at incorporating some language around this topic in our bylaws. We've done some training of village leaders through the Untraining. We're looking now at building a diversity, equity, and inclusion institute. We're now recruiting for new board members. So we're looking at board of directors, who needs to be included in our board of directors. A lot of our villages are looking at membership dues. How are they a barrier? And what can we do about membership dues? So that we can support ourselves and generate income, but not create a club that a lot of people can't access. And then we're always asking ourselves the question of what's next? So those are a few things that we're doing here. And I'm very excited. And I probably have about 25 leaders within our statewide movement who are very, very engaged in this journey with us. And I welcome any of your questions, emails, phone calls, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today about what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tracy, Nikki, and Charlotte. And we also have Pasit. We'll open it up for any questions at this time, or does anybody else have points you want to make sure you go back to and highlight? I think we know that this is a topic that is so incredibly important, and we can go on for days talking about, and should. So please, if you have resources to share or want to continue this discussion, I think we should do that.
I'm going to pull up and put in the chat the link to the video that I mentioned. So I'll do that as we're getting into the conversation.
Charlotte, this is Pasit. There was a question from Eddie in regards to what you call the legislation. And I wrote in that it's the Master Plan on Aging. And I'm wondering, just making sure that you see that question, see if I've answered that correctly.
So say that again. Let's see. Let's say, what about the legislation? If you could, I'm not sure because I don't see the chat. So,
So he's asking, let me just see that. What's the new senior advisory on aging, disability, and Alzheimer's support villages in California and in the legislature?
Hold on a second. I'm so sorry that it's hard for me to get a handle on that question. So there is a robust process happening. Okay, what's the news? So the senior advisory, well, there are a lot of moving parts to the implementation of the master plan for aging in California. And so one position that was just announced is the senior advisor on aging, disability, and Alzheimer's. And that person, and that is Kim McCoy-Wade, who is the California Department of Aging director. She's moving from that position to the bigger position. And her job will be to oversee cross-departmental work across the departments within California state government to make sure that all of these objectives of the master plan for aging are implemented. So that's one piece, and we have a relationship with Kim, and we have a relationship with the incoming California Department of Aging director. Then there are lots of work groups. We've got the equity work group, impact. There's just a whole cottage industry around implementing the master plan for aging. So we are doing our best to form relationships with people who are on all of those different groups, to engage with the formal processes that we're invited to engage in, and to really put ourselves in front of all of these people, all of these players. We've also submitted a budget request to the state for a 3-year budget for like $1.something million. So I guess what I would say is we're trying to fully engage in the state policy arena in order to advance the village movement as a viable, reliable, cost-effective system for meeting the needs and the desires of so many older adults to age in their homes. And we're also really talking about how there's a significant missing middle. There's a significant number of people who are not eligible for IHSS and home support services and the other federally funded programs for older adults, but they're not wealthy. So what are we going to do for them? And that conversation is really taking place in California now. So we're really trying to kind of get into that angle of looking at things. So I know that that's a lot. I hope I answered your question, Eddie. I'm happy to talk to anybody about this one-on-one. It's super complicated. I wish we had a policy director because it's big.
I think what I'd like to do is pose the question to the group. There's a question, somebody with a UU fellowship has dealt with issues of racism and it's created a lot of emotional upset. I will put a couple primers out there that racism exists across our entire community in the United States of America and our Western world. And so bringing that to light and having experienced it, have any of you, how have you facilitated that, or because having these conversations means owning privilege, means experiencing racism or microaggressions, again, things that we could talk more about. But Nikki, Tracy, Charlotte, or Pazit, have you facilitated or experienced that in your experience?
This is Tracy. We have not, through the village strategy at this point, but we did have just completed a very large effort with our senior centers, which is another funded strategy that's kind of a sister strategy to the village movement. And we had a whole series for our senior center directors that we fund for age, race, and inclusion. And it's, I mean, I don't think that we can give it due course in the amount of time we have to talk about when racism comes up or when those discomforts come up in a training and a facilitation like that. It's a great question and a consideration, and it takes a lot of support and safety and consideration and offering those trainings and creating opportunities for people to look at things for the first time or to dive into places where they've already experienced this and they are the representation. They represent the group that is experiencing the racism. So I don't think we have enough time to, but it is something we're tackling.
I think that we're
One
at our.
thing, I just would suggest, looking for partners, consultants, community-based organizations who could help you kind of think this through and bring some resources. I think it's important to acknowledge how difficult and tricky these conversations can be, and to really make sure you have the resources to support them. And so that would be one answer to the question is, get some help.
Well, thank you all. This was a great session. I appreciate all your time and expertise, and the information was flowing in our chat room. We will be capturing that and all the resources that you put in. So we do appreciate that tremendously. And it's a good wake-up call for a lot of us, a lot of our villages, to expand. We've done minute, as indicated in the chat, but we can do more. So we're going to leave on that note. We look forward. Make sure that everybody looks at our exhibitor hall. They've been neglected. Tell our sponsors hello and go visit them. It's open, 24/7 throughout. And then the conference starts tomorrow with a great speaker on ageism. So come back and we will see you tomorrow for our last day. Thanks again.
Take care, everybody.
Bye now.
Thank you for the opportunity. And thanks for all you're doing.